Thank you very much. I'm going to go right to it. Yesterday, we received a request from OMB. We've talked about it. Senator Tester mentioned it on the supplemental. I shared with you that in my airport, I was behind a gentleman, or in front of a gentleman, who told me he was on his way to Tucson, Arizona, and his son's a border agent. And I said, well, how's he doing? He's frustrated because he's taking care of children and he's not doing what I think is frontline duty, and he's frustrated. And that was like a totally unsolicited comment from me if I hadn't, prefaced it with anything. So for some context, could you explain exactly how human smugglers are exploiting our generous asylum laws in ways we didn't contemplate when the laws were first created?
Absolutely, Senator. So this smuggling process has evolved and become more complex and differentiated over the last several years. We've seen in the last 5 years, from the first crisis with families and children coming to our border, 68,000 children, 68,000 families in 2014. We're now seeing that level of families almost in 1 month. And what's happened is that smugglers have made clear in their advertisements, these are storefront type operations in the Western Highlands of Guatemala, for instance, that if you bring a child, if you come to the U.S. border now and bring a child, that they're not going to be able to detain you through your process and to remove you effectively. You'll be allowed to stay. And that's what we're hearing in our interviews of people crossing. That's what they're expressing when we bring media down, when we have members of Congress interact with families crossing. There are difficult conditions in Central America, for sure. But what we see is the smugglers taking advantage of those conditions and advertising that this is time to go to the U.S. and then exploiting them by charging $5,000 to $7,000 per person to make the journey and to cross our border.
So in light of that, last year we provided $400 million to address some of the humanitarian aspects of the crisis, and you've asked for more in the supplemental and then more for next year. Have these resources depleted? Are they gone? What are you going to do if you don't get the supplemental? How do you handle that issue?
That's a significant challenge, Senator. So when we asked for the supplemental funding last year, that was a request we developed during the budget dialogue and negotiations, asked for about $800 million. That was on with the traffic levels at 60,000 a month. As you noted, we had 103,000 in March, and we see that sustaining day to day in April. So really, our request was for a lower number of crossings, first and foremost, and for a set of requirements that we understood at the time in January. Those requirements have expanded, and it's everything from facilities, medical care, transportation, food, and really the ability to help our agents get back to the border and manage the border security aspects by supporting them with contract personnel to provide that care and custody support so they can do their law enforcement mission. So it's a whole variety of requirements, and we can talk about what we've done with the FY19 funding, which was very helpful, but also why we need this additional funding to increase our capacity.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move to something else. I know we're going to have time for other questions. On the ICE interior enforcement, it's my understanding that most of the individuals you are detaining as a result of interior enforcement have committed crimes, and they're often serious ones. But in fact, because ICE has sent personnel down to the border to assist with managing this current surge, enforcement data suggests that this may be impacting our interior immigration enforcement, which is down nearly 10%. Can you help me understand what's happening here and how this is impacting your ICE workforce?
Thank you, Senator. I think this is an important area just to clarify. 75% of all people that come into ICE detention are recent border entrants that have been apprehended by CBP at the border. That is the bulk of the people they're encountering. The other 25% are from interior enforcement. And within that 25%, 9 out of 10 have a criminal record. They're very much focusing on the safety of communities and identifying and detaining and removing those people that present a threat.
So if those resources that are trying to get to the 90% of the 25%, if the resources there in terms of agents and are deployed to the border, which is, I understand that's what's happened to that workforce, is that correct? What's happening then to the interior enforcement aspect of it? It's obviously dwindling. The numbers show that. Is that correct?
This is an integrated system, so any redeployment has consequences to other aspects of the mission.
Yeah.
We have needed to deploy ICE personnel to the border to work alongside Border Patrol agents in processing both adults and families that are arriving, transporting children to HHS, and that does impact their ability to conduct fugitive operations in major cities around the country, as well as protect communities and their field offices away from the border. So that is absolutely a concern.
So very quickly, on the ICE beds now, there are like 50,000 that are occupied, correct, right now, approximately? How does that break down? How many of those are, average stay, long, short? I mean, if you could make it, I'm passing the time here.
So briefly, and there's two different aspects to this. Again, that intake is about 3/4 from the border, 25% from the interior. But on an average day, because it takes longer to finish a case on an interior arrest than a border arrest, the balance of the population is about 60-40 from the border versus from interior operations.
So 60 from the border, 40 from the interior?
Correct. Okay. And again, those interior arrests and the people in custody, 9 out of 10 have a criminal record.
Right.